A pleasant good evening to everybody, and a special welcome. And I hope that you're enjoying your stay here to the four Canadians. On behalf of all Kititians and divisions, welcome to the Federation, and I hope that you are enjoying your stay here. The only thing I have for me going, I think, is my God-given talent and my objectivity. I like to be objective. So let us, in a scientific way, just look at what is going on. Let us look at fungal spores. A fungal spore has two major aspects: physical aspect and the chemical aspect. So even if you're to clean and apparently destroy the spore, there is still a chemical that you call mycotoxin that remains a part of that spore. So even a dead, so to speak, dead spore is attached to someone, it can still be dangerous because of the chemical component which is referred to as a mycotoxin. So you can be moving around, you can do cleaning, and as long as you do not rid the environment of those dead spores, it can still be of a health issue to many persons. That mycotoxin is lipid soluble, meaning that it dissolves in the lipid underneath the skin. And that is why you will feel an itching sensation whenever you are attacked by my fungal spores. Rusty indicated that his daughter would have been affected by the eyes, and his wife also indicated that. There is no protective barrier between the olfactory and the optic nerves. So therefore, once you would have inhaled those mycotoxins, they would automatically reach their final destination. Since there is no protective barrier, inhalation would eventually lead to the optic nerves, which is in the eye area. So that would explain apparently why this child unfortunately is suffering from such a situation. Now, whether the school must be reoccupied or not, we have to examine two simple things. Do we go for mere mitigation? Mitigation is to improve upon the condition of a bad situation. Or should we go for arresting the problem? Arresting the problem means to stop it. I have heard persons before me indicated that once you go to a level of sufficient dilution, then it is okay now, safe to reoccupy the school. That could be rather risky because, you see, you have to be very careful. At that institution, when Kariri did their first report, they indicated that there were fungal spores that were unidentified, meaning that they were not able to identify them because of morphological characteristics that were lacking. They were unable to identify them. And what I found strange was that even though they were unable to identify them, in other words, know of the physiological impact on human beings, they were still saying that the count is low. That word low created a problem for me. I happened to be in a meeting, a consultation, with the guy who actually produced that report. And I indicated to him in no uncertain terms that the report is misleading because he is using the word low. And I told him that low is synonymous to saying that it is safe for human occupancy. Now, I indicated to him, why would you say that? And he paused, looked at his partner, and he couldn't find an explanation. And I said to him, you ought not to put the word low in your report because you're giving the misconception that even because it is low, it is safe. International authorities on exposure to mycotoxin fungal spores, they would have indicated that it is extremely difficult to establish an exposure limit. So if you cannot say that something, you could be exposed to something for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 2 minutes, how could you indicate that something is low? You'll be misleading. And if you did not identify something, how could you indicate that it is low? You have to be aware sufficiently well in order to guide people when you're dealing with people's health. And I told him where to go and do his research. I said, look, you cannot, the international authorities on these stuff, they have failed to date to identify what exposure limit you can put on human beings with respect to the species of fungal spores that they found at the Bastia High School. So even if you want to say that they did mitigation down to a dilution point, you might be surprised. One beer might jump you. It may take 40 beers to jump somebody else. That is exposure, alcoholic exposure, consumption. So it is very difficult for, and the authority said it, we cannot establish it. And what is also worrying to me is short-term exposure limit. When I ask him, what time frame do you put on short-term exposure limit? That is STEL. It is an acronym, S-T-E-L, STEL, short-term exposure limit. He told me 15 minutes. I said to him, well, if you are compiling this information based on short-term exposure limit, and that is based on 15 minutes. There is no class period at the Bastia High School that is only 15 minutes. The shortest you would have is about an hour. Some would go an hour and a half. Break is 15 minutes. So that had to be misleading. How could you examine something on a short-term exposure limit of 15 minutes when students would sit in that environment for way past 15 minutes? And that is why we have to be careful when we are examining mitigation, whether the conditions would have improved sufficiently well, or whether it should be totally arrested. And I am of the strong belief that because scientists were unable, or are still unable, to establish what the short-term exposure limit is, it is unsafe to reoccupy a building where you do not know how it will physiologically impact a human being. If you had a decisive or definite exposure limit, then it would have been okay to say, well, 10 would affect you, 5 would not affect you, 2 is safe. But if you don't have that, it's very difficult for you to say that it would have mitigated sufficiently well. We have to be careful. Another issue that I have is that we are looking at the fungal spores only as a source of pathogens. But at the Bastia High School, the vent pipe that you use in plumbing to give off the gas or the vapor from your wastewater system, the report indicated that they are too low. And maybe we don't understand the vapor or the gas that you have coming out from sewage. They are very dangerous. They are filled with pathogens. They're having viruses, they're having bacteria, and they're having protozoa. They can all cause major health difficulties for us, from gastroenteritis down to hepatitis and those other stuff. We ought not to hide anything anymore. We need to educate. And maybe if from the beginning, this particular course of action, instead of being a debate and having the antagonistic environment, had they educated the people, it would have been a little smoother. But whenever you have a debate, you'll always have opposition. Because a debate is like philosophy. Nobody right, nobody wrong. It's whoever could substantiate what they're putting forward best or better. You understand? So we have to be very careful. Apart from the pathogens of viruses, bacteria, and protozoa that you will find coming off of sewage, you also have gases. And one of the most dangerous gases you have is hydrogen sulfide. That is the one with the smell of rotten eggs. You have to be most careful because that gas, most of you might have experienced it in the complex of the prison and the police station. That is the same similar to the one that you would experience going into Sandy Point. When bacteria start to multiply, they do so exponentially. And whenever they do that, they produce hydrogen sulfide. Now, hydrogen sulfide attacks the nervous system. And surprisingly, if you are in an area where hydrogen sulfide is present, you would only smell it for a while. Somebody would have to come later on and say, Patrice, what are you doing sitting down here and smell the place? Because what hydrogen sulfide does, it numbs the senses. It numbs. So after a while, you would not be aware that you are inhaling this dangerous gas. If you stay there sufficiently long, then you can pass out. And I'm not surprised that I heard of students who passed out at the Bastia High School and had to be transported to the hospital. As a matter of fact, my daughter was one. And I did my own analysis. Well, I'm in this field because I used to be an environmentalist, project officer, education officer. So I'm always in this field, traveling with the health officers and trying to help them as much as possible. Hydrogen sulfide gas is a dangerous gas. So we must not look at the pollution created by the fungal spores alone, but we must understand that apart from the physical component, there's a chemical component. And we must also look at the fact that sewage would give off dangerous gases, and they'll also have pathogens, airborne, viruses, bacteria, and protozoa. So we have to be careful whether or not we are willing to take that risk, whether we would go for mitigation, or mitigation to what extent. How could you tell me something is okay if you don't know what the okay target is? Or should we go for complete arrest? Now, based on the number of recommendations we have, I do not see that all that can take place within time frame now to September 1st. It is difficult. If we do that, we are only reoccupying the school based on mitigating circumstances, meaning that the condition would have been improved. But who are we to indicate that the extent to which it has improved is safe for our children? Not even a doctor at times would assist you unless you tell the doctor, it's like you're paying somebody to tell him what's wrong with you, because if you don't talk to him, you cannot diagnose what is wrong. And research would have shown that many diseases or ailments that they could not identify causative agents for, they are now associating directly with fungal spores. So back then, when they could not say what caused this particular ailment, and it went unaddressed, they are now associating fungal spores, a lot of that. We have to be fair to our country. There is something called an affront to moral conscience. When you know better and you say and do otherwise, it is an affront for moral conscience. You cannot look at a report. The report has indicated that there was no single causative agent. Well, I don't understand why you can put a twist on that. To me, that is simple English 101. There was no single causative agent. It did not say that there was absolutely no agent. In other words, you couldn't pinpoint out of the million of them which one caused it. It might have been a collective impact of many. So to say that there was not a single causative agent. And when I used to play cricket, I batted number 3. And at my age, where I am less nimble, I'm now asked to bat spin. You cannot put spin on things like that. You or the community, we or our children. The objectivity of truth. Certain things you cannot be subjective with, because there is no substrata of the truth. The truth has one layer back. There's not this certification and that certification and that. The truth is only but one thing. Any deviation from the truth is a lie. And we have to be careful. We really have to be careful when we are trying to convince others. And only when you have the power to do it and nobody can pull a mic from you, you get away with it. But you have intelligent people out there listening. We feel that intelligent people are only those who went to university to study. But I can tell you, those who went to university to study are knowledgeable persons. You have intelligent persons who don't even have one subject. But that doesn't take away the fact that they have a level of intelligence. And we must respect that. With respect to all that is going on, I'm a teacher. But I'm also altruistic. I'm a humanitarian at heart. And I could understand and empathize with people when they're going through certain things. So, Ms. Morton, I would like to say that the Lord shines in everything that is fair. The Lord shines in everything that is fair. And there is only one Lord, that supreme being of which nothing greater can be perceived. Whoever else wants to play Lord and God, so be it. But we must all be careful, regardless of which side of the fence we sit. There is only one Lord. And when you say that somebody's conscience is bothering them, that is where the Lord is now intervening. Because it is time. He is fed up of the twist and the spin, and he would intervene. When you hear somebody come and confess to you they didn't come off their own will, is that thing they call conscience. The conscience is the presence of the Lord inside of each and every one of us. You could resist it as much as you can, but the time would come. I don't wish to go on and on because I think I would have laid the groundwork for what would have happened. And if you have any questions, you could always ask. But I would like to say in reference to the transferring of teachers, you have to be very careful. Several years ago, when I registered to do doctoral studies in psychology, my area of concern was perception. The perception students have of the teachers would grossly impact the marks. And you have to be careful because if you believe that Mr. Charles is a great math teacher, regardless of the effort he puts out, whether mediocre, superior, or inferior, he would bring out the best out of you because perception is important. And at the University High, you would have had a situation where students would have established perceptions of the various teachers. And we know that the performance of them would have been great throughout the years. The greatness of those grades were not just based on ability, because you could have the ability, but somebody's not getting it out of you. You must have a strong perception that that person is capable of helping me. You could be putting out your best to help somebody with a math project problem, and they come to Nital and they say, I couldn't understand what he was saying. I might not do half as good as how that person did in explaining it, but the perception is that Newrish Nital is supposed to be great at teaching maths, and they hold on to it. Whereas the other person might have put out more than me. So it is important that you do not break bonds unnecessarily. It is important that you do not break bonds unnecessarily. Because at times when you think that you're doing something peripheral, you understand, it actually ends up at the nucleus. You could eat away at the nucleus. Seemingly superficial can reach nucleus deep, and you can destroy the morals, the psychological impact you could have on those students. It could be devastating, and it would take a while for total recuperation. We have to be careful. If you love the children, you ought not to destroy any bond that exists between them and whoever was placed in charge to command and guide them towards academic excellence. That's all I have to say.